Next, we have synecdoche. Synecdoche is simply the use of part to represent whole or whole to represent part. Like part of something, you use it to represent everything, or all of it, you use it to represent just a part. Let's make that, put that in writing. A part of something to represent the whole, or a whole to represent a part of something. So this figure of speech allows us to use a part of something to represent the whole. Most common example is the word wheels. That is a nice wheel. Ordinarily, wheel refers to the tires, but tires are part of the car. So you're not using the word wheel to represent the whole car. That is synecdoche. So that is a nice wheel, or the very popular all hands on deck. All hands on deck. Actually, you mean everyone should focus, put in work. So, but you're using hands, which is a part of the body, to represent a full person. So that's synecdoche. Hands are a part of the human body, and we use it to represent the whole. Or when you say asking for someone's hand in marriage, help me, help me, help me. When you say asking for one's hands in marriage, you're actually marrying a full human being, but you use just that hands to like represent. Or when you say a person is behind bars, the person is actually in a prison, like a fully built prison, but we use just the bars to like represent the prison. So that's example of synecdoche. In these examples, we are using part of it to represent the whole, and we call that microcosm. So we are using part of it to represent whole, we call it microcosm. And then when you're using the whole to represent a part, we call it macrocosm. If you're using a whole, for example, if you say the Federal Ministry of Health has announced, or they just announced that whatever, whatever, whatever. Actually, it is not the whole everybody involved in the federal ministry that came out to make the announcement. Probably the like spokesperson or PRO. One person came out to make the announcement on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Health. But if you want to report it, you say the Federal Ministry of Health announced. So that's an example of macrocosm. You using the full Federal Ministry of Health to just represent a person speaking. Next, we have metonymy. We have metonymy. Now, metonymy is similar to synecdoche. Why synecdoche means using a part of something to represent the whole, or a whole to represent a part. For metonymy, we are dealing with something that is closely related. It's not a part of it at all. We use a word that is closely related. Is the use of words that are closely related to replace. So here you are using words that are related to replace themselves. Let's use an example to really explain. For example, spin for dancing. Now, when you are dancing, most times, usually, especially two people dancing, they usually like take circles. So when you now use spin to replace dancing, for example, we went for a spin. Trying to say we went to dance, we use the word spin to replace dancing because they are related. We say that is metonymy. Ride for a car, crown to represent royalty, altar for marriage. So let's note the difference now. Here we say wheel for car. Why? Because wheel is a part of the car, but ride is not a part of the car. You can only use a car to go for rides. So rides and car, they are like associated. So you can actually replace the word car for ride, and people will understand what you're talking about based on this association or the similarity between these words. Or crown for reality, altar for marriage. These are related words. So by the time you use the word altar to, like, instead of saying they got married, you say they went to the altar. So use of this to replace this word, we call it metonymy. So a very common example would be the pen is mightier than the sword. Where you're using the pen now to represent like intellectual knowledge and the sword for physical strength because they are related. So this is an example, a very common example of metonymy. Next we have apostrophe. Apostrophe. Next we have apostrophe. This is different from the punctuation mark in English grammar. Apostrophe for figures of speech simply means addressing an absent person or an inanimate object or like an abstract idea. Basically something that can't reply. Addressing, sorry, no comma here. An absent person, an inanimate object, or an abstract concept. So addressing this, like they were present and they could answer you, but we know that addressing them, we refer to apostrophe, things that cannot like provide an answer. You could mostly it's in the form of questions, but apostrophe it's not always in form of question, though they may mostly come in questions, not all time. So when you address an absent person or an inanimate object or an abstract concept, refer to it as apostrophe. For example, sometimes people can hold up a picture and looking at the person, you be like, you should have just stayed. Why did you leave? The picture can't reply. So you addressing that picture like you're talking to someone, we refer to it as apostrophe. Or you can have death. Why are you so cruel? Death cannot reply you. So if you have death, why are you so cruel? Death cannot reply. Death is an abstract concept, but you're like questioning it as though it can give you an answer to why it is so cruel when it cannot. So when you address an absent person or an inanimate object or abstract concept, we refer to it as apostrophe. When you address something that cannot reply you, we refer to it as apostrophe. Up next, We have rhetorical question. Now, rhetorical question. Rhetorical question is different from apostrophe. Two differences between rhetorical question and apostrophe. Rhetorical questions are always questions. Apostrophe may or may not be a question. Most times, apostrophes are questions, but not all the time. Unlike rhetorical questions, they are always questions. And then, while apostrophe is made, is a speech made to something or that cannot reply. Rhetorical question is a question asked for effect. So, though the people being asked or the person being asked can answer, he doesn't answer or they do not answer. So, for apostrophe, whoever is being addressed cannot reply. But for rhetorical question, they can actually reply, but they do not reply. Why? Because the question is meant for effect. The person asking the question even knows the answer to the question. For example, who wants to die? That question is rhetorical because even me asking the question, I know that nobody wants to die. So I don't expect an answer. I'm just asking for like effect. So there are questions that do not require answers. The person asking, the answer is obvious, let's put it that way. So rhetorical questions are questions asked for effect, or they are questions that do not need answers. For example, the question I just asked, who wants to die? Or who wants to die young? Let's put it that way. Whoever prays and be like, okay, I pray to God, or whoever you serve and be like, let me just die in my 20s. It's actually like you won't find anyone like that. So this is a rhetorical question because the person asking doesn't expect an answer. The person asking knows the answer. The people being asked know the answer to the question. Then if a person asks a rhetorical question and immediately goes ahead to answer, we refer to that as hypophora. So usually rhetorical questions are questions that do not require answers. So if the person that asks the question goes ahead to like immediately provide the answer, for example, who wants to die young? Nobody. So there we now refer to that as hypophora rather than rhetorical question. The figure of speech then becomes hypophora. Next we have symbolism. Simply the use of symbols. Symbolism is simply the use of symbols, and a symbol is simply something that stands for another thing or something that represents another thing. So symbols can be anything a writer chooses to use. It can be words, it can be objects or abstract concepts, rather characters, what have you. So we can use them as symbols depending on whatever the writer chooses to use. So that's symbolism, the use of symbols. For example, we use green, the color, to represent fertile land. Most times, the color green is a symbol for fertile land, or red roses, symbols of love, ring for commitment. When people are getting married, they exchange rings as a sign or is a symbol of their commitment to each other. So these are examples of symbolism. We use of symbols. I would say symbols are simply things that stand for other things. Up next, we have allusion. We have allusion. Allusion is simply a reference, like reference to something. It could be reference to a place, an event, a person. That's allusion for you, just references. And the most common allusion we have is biblical allusion, where you make references to the Bible. So for audiences or readers to recognize allusion, they have to be familiar with what you are referencing, the source material, the source. They have to be familiar with the source where you are referencing from. So for them to be able to understand allusion, let's write down the definition. Is a reference to something. Allusion is a reference to something. Be it a place, an event, or a person. That's allusion. I would say the most common one is the biblical allusion, where we have examples like calling someone a good Samaritan. You should be familiar with the parable of the good Samaritan in the Bible to understand that allusion, or calling someone Jonah. You have to be familiar with the story of Jonah to understand the biblical allusion there. So allusion is simply a reference to something, and it's easier for audiences or readers to understand if they know the source, if they know what you are referencing, to be easier to understand allusion. Now, apart from biblical allusion, you also have like referencing other literary works. For example, calling someone Romeo. They're trying to reference Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. So it's not necessarily, but the biblical allusion is just like the most common one we have, but you can actually reference other literary works as well, like Romeo and Juliet, and then people from history. For example, we have opening Pandora's box. There are different stories about Pandora. So, but this is a reference or an allusion, rather. When you say opening Pandora's box, it's an allusion to the person Pandora. Next, we have battles, sometimes called anticlimax. Battles or anticlimax is simply a sudden transition from an important topic to a trivial one. Sorry. Battles or anticlimax is a sudden transition from an important, like you could be discussing, and then you're listening or you're saying important things. Suddenly, you just veer off to something very unimportant. Let's say this very common example: he died doing what he loved most, and then you write. Normally, after hearing this sentence, I mean, he died, you're talking of like something really serious and grave, the death of somebody, and then doing what you love most, you must have like, you'll be expecting something really important, and then the person says arguing with his wife. Here, you're already like going serious, and then towards the end, he suddenly transits into arguing with his wife. That's what we mean by battles or anticlimax. Sudden transition from an important topic to a trivial one, or from a meaningful topic to a common one. Let's put it that way. With this very common example, you're discussing something meaningful, and then suddenly you see an unimportant topic there. We've looked at so many figures of speech, from simile, metaphor, assonance, consonance, alliteration, metonymy, and the likes. Now let's answer questions based on figures of speech. JAMB past questions. gotten from the O2 Schools JAMB app under figures of speech. We have the sun smiled gently on the sea. Illustrates dash. So that sentence, the sun smiled gently on the sea. The question is asking us which figure of speech is it illustrating? So we look at the options. A. Paradox. B. Euphemism. C. Hyperbole. And D. Personification. So the sun smiled gently on the trees. On the same illustrates which figure of speech. We have paradox, euphemism, hyperbole, and our answer here becomes personification because here we are attributing a human quality to an inanimate object. The sun cannot smile, but we are attributing it anyway in the sentence. The sun smiled gently on the same. So we have personification. The next question we have a play on words for literary effect is dash. A we have poem, B we have satire, C eulogy, and D we have paradox. A play on words for literary effect is pun. Pun is simply playing on words, and it does that using words that are similar, words that sound similar. Then we have man, many hands make light work. So which figure of speech is this sentence containing? Answer A, Sigma. B, hyperbole. C, metonymy. And D, synecdoche. So we look at the sentence, many hands make light work. And the options are Sigma, hyperbole, metonymy, synecdoche. I know we didn't look at Sigma. Sigma is simply when you use a word in a sentence to mean like to for different meanings. For example, if you say he lost his, let's say, his job, briefcase, and his mind. So you're using the word lost here for two different things. For example, he lost his job, he lost his briefcase, simply means like he misplaced these items. But then he lost his mind does not mean he misplaced his mind. It means he like went crazy or so. So that's Zilpa when you use a word for more than one meaning in sentences. But that's not what is happening in the sentence given to us. Here they say many hands make light work. You know, it's not just the hands working. The hands are just the part that does the work. So we're using a part to represent whole here, which brings us to synecdoche. That's the figure of speech that deals with a part representing the whole. The other question we have here, it is a matter of sad joy. So we identify the figure of speech in this sentence again. The options are A. Oxymoron. B. Bathos. C. Simile. And D. Irony. It is a matter of sad joy. That means we're using like opposite words or opposing words rather in a sentence, which is oxymoron. When you use two conflicting or contradictory words in a statement or in a sentence, we are dealing with oxymoron. Take note, two words. If the whole sentence is contradictory or the sentence conflicts itself, we're dealing with paradox. Next question we have, a time to sow, a time to reap, a time to be born, a time to die. So we say this exemplifies the use of dash. So this excerpt given to us, a time to sow, a time to reap, a time to be born, a time to die. So I want to say what is prevalent there. Our options, we have A, metaphor, B, anaphora, C, simile, and D, ambiguity. Here we have anaphora, because that's what the repetition of a particular word or phrase at the beginning is. We are dealing with anaphora. So we have a time to, a time to, a time to, a time to be repeated at the beginning. We are dealing with anaphora. Next question we have, sweet smile in time of snarl. Time, sorry. Gives pride in spite of snare. Sing, comma, rid this world of despair. And save a snared heart from cascading stream of strife. Now the question says the dominant figure of speech is A. We have rhyme. B. Onomatopoeia. C. Alliteration. And D. We have antony. So here the question says, what is the dominant figure of speech in this excerpt given to us? And the answer is alliteration, because we are dealing with repetition of a consonant sound at the beginning. Here, sweet smile, time of snare, spite of snare. sing. Then we have save a snared stream of strife. So you can see the dominant figure of speech there is alliteration, which is repetition of a consonant sound at the beginning of words that are close to each other in sentences or statements, as the case may be. So that's the dominant figure of speech there. Next question we have, they do not see the funeral piles at home eating up the forest. And our options are A, metaphor, B, personification, C, synecdoche, and D, euphemism. Here, this sentence says, they do not see the funeral piles at home eating up the forest. We have metaphor, personification, synecdoche, euphemism. And our answer here becomes personification because here you are attributing a human quality to something that is not human. Funeral piles cannot eat. Eating is a quality of humans, and you attributing that quality to something that is non-human, refer to it as personification. These questions, I pulled them from the O3 Schools JAMB app under figures of speech. So you can download the app and get many more questions that you can practice with to solidify your knowledge on figures of speech. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.